It is the year 1477. For the last 10 years, the imperial city of Kyoto underwent a relentless struggle for power between two influential Japanese clans, whose conflict turned the once proud city into a charred pile of rubble. Although the bled-out Hosokawa clan was nominally victorious, the decade-long Onin War was in fact largely inconclusive. While saying that this conflict plunged feudal Japan into over a century of civil war may be a bit of a stretch, as the slow disintegration of the shogun's grip on Japan's provinces began years earlier, the Onin War was a clear sign to the samurai class that the Ashikaga family simply did not have the power to maintain their rule over Japan. Sporadic fighting across the country took place both before and after the war, but the events in Kyoto only encouraged the nobility of the Japanese countryside. The shogunate had shown its weakness, and local nobles were quick to take advantage, strengthening their own power and influence. This process, known today as Gekko Kujo, literally meaning the weak dominating the strong, soon produced some of the finest warlords and generals who over the course of the 16th century rose to power and struggled to become the sole rulers of medieval Japan. One of the most successful nobles of early Sengoku who climbed the social ladder in the late 15th century was Shunkuro, a representative of a side branch of the moderately influential Ise clan. It is said that he left Kyoto with 6 followers during the Onin War and found himself in the middle of a succession dispute, which took place shortly after the death of his brother-in-law, Lord Imagawa of Suruga province. Shunkuro backed the claim of the late lord's underage son, Uchichika, greatly helping him to secure his inheritance by killing the other contender. In 1487, Uchichika came of age, becoming the head of the Imagawa family. And Shunkuro was soon rewarded for his loyalty and merit with the Kokokuji Castle, a clear sign of his rising social status. As Shunkuro gained some initial recognition, for the sake of clarity, from now on we will use his posthumous name, Hojo Soun. Being a holder of a castle, Soun's reach extended further. He was able to involve himself in the local politics of the Izu province to the south, where the internal rule was constantly being challenged by other lords. Despite early gains, it took him 5 years to completely subordinate the peninsula. The subduing of Izu virtually made him one of the first Sengoku daimyos, a powerful feudal lord, coming a long way from his relatively low position in the Japanese feudal system. Unsurprisingly, being the lord of Izu didn't satiate Soun's desire for power. Just 1 year later, 2 of his neighbors of the Omori and Uesugi families died, enabling Soun to win the trust of Omori's young heir. He sent him frequent gifts, all the while plotting to take over his holdings in Suruga province. According to law, Soun was granted permission to hunt in the Omori lands, and he used this opportunity to hide his troops in the nearby mountains. When night fell, his men stormed Omori's castle, yelling and lighting hundreds of torches in order to make the defenders believe they were being attacked by 10,000 soldiers. Lord Omori eventually panicked and ran away, leaving the castle undefended. True or not, Soun came into possession of Odawara Castle, a formidable stronghold which later became the capital of the Hojo clan, and was subject to heavy upgrades over the following decades. Soun spent his later years focusing on further incursions into Sagami province, which eventually led him to the subordination of the Miura clan in 1516. Through his extraordinary political, military, and administrative efforts, Soun not only unified 2 provinces of a heavily divided Japan under his rule, but most importantly, set a rock-solid foundation for the late Hojo clan. Over the following decades, with land holdings and influence vastly expanded by his descendants, Hojo became one of the leading clans on the medieval map of Japan. Our focus now shifts to the second main character of this episode. Whilst Hojo Soun fought for domination in Sagami to the east, the western Honshu region saw the emergence of another renowned warlord. Enter Motonari, a young member of the slightly declining Mori clan of Aki province in the year 1516. It is at this point that his older brother suddenly dies of an alcohol overdose, and Motonari becomes an overseer of his underage son, Komatsumaru. Due to this temporary lack of stability, the Mori clan was soon challenged by their neighbors, the Takeda branch of Aki province. Despite his lack of experience, Motonari took up the gauntlet and gathered as many men as he could. The ensuing battle was a surprising victory for the outnumbered Mori forces, led by the 20-year-old Greenhorn, which boosted Motonari's popularity and saved Mori's position in Aki province. In 1523, Komatsumaru died at the age of 9, and Motonari was elected as the new head of the Mori family by their vassals. Being surrounded by two much more powerful clans, Amago and Ouchi, Motonari's method to secure his domain was to carefully balance between his neighbors. Because the Amago lords supported Motonari's enemies within his own clan, Motonari eventually sided with his original liege, the Ouchi. Though not immediate, his action brought down the ire of Amago on the Mori clan. In 1540, he gathered a sizable army and invaded Motonari's holdings. The latter wasn't strong enough to challenge the enemy in the field, so he retreated to the Koriyama castle and requested aid from his overlord to the west. A relief force under Ouchi's retainer, Sue Harukata, arrived in December, and both allies defeated Amago in a series of skirmishes, forcing him to retreat. This victory and subsequent death of the Amago daimyo encouraged both Ouchi and Mori to attack their eastern enemy. But the offensive campaign of 1542 was largely unsuccessful, and its most important result was that the Ouchi daimyo lost interest in military endeavors and relied more on his senior retainers. Thus, the failed campaign versus the Amago unexpectedly enabled Motonari to forge new alliances and expand his influence in the Aki province. Lord Mori also paid a lot of attention to tutoring his 3 sons so they could serve him as skilled generals and allies. He adopted 2 of his younger offspring to other significant families of Aki, which allowed him to eventually install both of them as heads of those clans in 1550, thus bolstering his own military and political capabilities. The following year, a new threat emerged. The strongest of the Ouchi retainers, Sue Harukata, being annoyed by his lord's passive attitude, raised his banners and rebelled against the Ouchi clan. Upon realizing that nobody was going to aid him against this sedition, Ouchi Yoshitaka committed suicide and was replaced by his distant relative Yoshinaga. The new Ouchi daimyo was in fact Sue's candidate, as Harukata needed to legitimize his actions, and Motonari actively supported the coup in exchange for being recognized as the sole ruler of the Bingo and Aki provinces by Sue. The collusion of the Sue and Mori clans soon ended when Harukata revoked his recognition of Mori's rule in Aki and Bingo, being concerned with Motonari's rising influence in the region. Open conflict between the two erupted in 1554, and while Motonari spent the last few years preparing for this expected hostility, his military potential was nowhere near the capabilities of the powerful Lord Sue. He could field no more than 5,000 men, while his opponent had several times as many soldiers at his disposal. Though it's fair to say that while Sue had the advantage on land, Mori's sea fleet was most likely the stronger one. The disparity between the opposing forces was further decreased as Motonari gained an upper hand in initial skirmishes. What's more, he was able to bribe some of Harukata's soldiers over to his side. The campaigning season eventually came to an end without any major encounter. But Motonari knew that further incursions from Sue were just a matter of time. He had just half of the year to set up his defenses. As expected, Harukata's attacks continued in the spring of the next year. He repeatedly attempted to take the strategically important Miyao Castle on the Miyajima Island, hoping to achieve better control of the Seto Inland Sea and undermine Mori's strong naval presence in the area. This gave Motonari an idea to lure his enemy. He reinforced the island stronghold of Miyao while instructing his commander at the nearby mainland castle of Sakurao to fake defections to Sue's side. It was a credible deception, as the holder of Sakurao actually fought against Motonari during his succession years earlier. Sue took the bait and followed the plan of his new supposed ally. While the former assaulted Miyajima with a sizable army and besieged Miyao Castle, the latter agreed to keep Mori busy and attack his castle, Koriyama, further inland. It was a sizable risk for Motonari, as the plan relied entirely on the loyalty of his subordinate at Sakurao. Throughout 1555, the Mori forces played a largely defensive role in order to lower Harukata's guard. Following the successful campaign on the island, the latter grew complacent, as Miyajima's strategic location allowed Harukata to launch naval attacks on nearby shores. In early October, Motonari began the second part of his plan. He mustered his troops for the upcoming attack in the vicinity of Kusatsu Castle to the north, waiting for the promised support of Murakami pirates. Pressed by time and the dire situation at Miyao Castle, he eventually departed to the nearby harbor to board his ships, while some of his men sailed to reinforce the Miyao garrison, which was not only hard-pressed by the enemy, but also deprived of fresh water as Sue's soldiers managed to find and cut off the castle's water supply. The next day, the Murakami clan finally arrived, bolstering Motonari's forces, much to his relief. While a contingent under one of his sons kept Sue's attention, Lord Mori waited until late evening. Under the cover of darkness and accompanied by a thunderstorm, he set sail to the northeastern part of the island, where he prepared his men for a final move. At dawn, Motonari's son also landed on the beach, and in order to synchronize the attack with the other units, blew shell trumpets initiating the attack. Various Mori contingents fell upon the completely surprised enemy. In the ensuing battle frenzy, many Sue retainers died before they were able to mount any kind of meaningful defense. Soon, the Miyao garrison joined the fray. But for a brief moment, the one-sided slaughter abated as Sue's forces managed to muster a feeble line of defense. However, Harukata's resistance was futile, as the main part of his troops was surrounded and the rest had already either committed suicide or drowned in a desperate attempt to swim to the mainland. Harukata managed to force his way west, but soon realized that all hope was lost and committed suicide. Although it took 2 more days for the Mori soldiers to hunt down and defeat the remnants of the scattered enemy units, it was an impressive show of Motonari's strategic sense and planning skills. It was a great victory for the Mori clan. Shortly after the battle, Motonari ordered the removal of the bodies to the mainland and commanded a thorough purge of the sacred island. By wiping out the Sue threat, Motonari put himself in a favorable position, especially considering the weakness of the Ouchi clan. Thanks to his strategic planning and the invaluable help of his sons, over the next 5 years, Motonari grew to the position of the most powerful daimyo of Western Japan, taking full advantage of his growing reputation and subsequently conquering neighboring clans and provinces. The ascension to power of Hojo Soun and Mori Motonari were 2 of the finest examples of Gekkokujo, the weak overthrowing the strong. And while they set the foundations for 2 powerful clans that claimed dominance in 16th century Japan, we have yet to meet equally capable but definitely more famous figures of the Sengoku Jidai.